right, please welcome to the stage Bingham Bryant and Adrian Dannatt from Doomed and Famous. Eve Liu from Nervous Energy. Mary Rose McClain of February Omen. Nathan Silver of Carol and Joy. And last but certainly not least, David Cardoza of Turtle Sandwich. Thank you all so much for being here and sharing your films with us today. It's been a really big joy watching the program all the way through. Just to get into it, Bingham and Adrian, I was hoping we could start with you, and if you could tell us a little bit about how you came to know each other and how you went about adapting a gallery show into a short film.
I always tell a very embarrassing story about meeting Bingham, so I'm not going to tell the full shameful story. But about 10 years ago, I was in a small gallery in downtown New York, and I saw this beautiful boy, gorgeous 24-year-old. And so I just went over and started picking him up, basically, thinking, who is this fabulous child? And then he said his name was Bingham Bryant, and I went, this is even better. This is like, and then the story gets more and more embarrassing, but we're going to try and avoid that bit. I looked him up, and at that point, why am I even telling this long story? But anyway, at this point, I looked it up, and he was only famous at that point. He was in People magazine, being photographed with an emu. An emu, is that how you pronounce it in America? An emu.
Emu.
For having, as a prep school boy, discovered a very rare painting in his school cafeteria, which was then sold for several $1 million. And I thought, this is the best guy ever. And it turned out to actually be true he was the best guy ever, because a decade later, I'm sitting here in the Walter Reed Theater, the best cinema in the whole of New York, watching myself, this like huge old face up on the screen. Unbelievable. All thanks to picking him up a decade ago. It's kind of incredible.
And then could you tell us a little bit more about the exhibition at the center of the film and how you...
The exhibition was a friend of mine, Miguel Abreu, who has an art gallery downtown, also has a publishing house, Sequence Press, and he published a kind of anthology of my obituaries that I'd written over the years of very obscure, fascinating, peculiar people, many of whom I'd known. They were basically obituaries of people who wouldn't otherwise have had a published obituary. And so he put those together, and then we did an exhibition of artworks that I had in New York in my kind of so-called collection of art. And then we saw a fabulous short film that Bingham had here in the New York Film Festival, right, Foreign Powers, a few years ago. And Miguel, who is a huge cinephile and actually studied cinema at CalArts and was very involved in film and film theory, said, gosh, this child Bingham is a fabulous genius person. We should get him to try and make a film. And so we tried to make a film.
But it happened, we had this idea to make the film, I think, we had one day with you before you left the country. And I think I had 3 days to plan it. So the shoot was rapid. We had basically a day and a half of shooting, a day with Adrian, and 3 days of planning, and then a very complicated edit, because I had the whole idea for what it would be, but I didn't have the passages marked because all of the texts in the film they're all excerpts from Adrian's book and from the program notes, but I sort of threaded together the things that I thought. There was some ambiguity about whether he was talking about the artist being written about or about himself. There was a double meaning possible, and also these places where I felt these themes about death and collecting and the relationship between art objects and their viewers. And so, yeah, and that took a long time later.
Certainly. And yours is one of two films in the program that's shot by Sean Price Williams, who's here somewhere, I think.
And Michelle also, we should say, who's sitting next to
Michelle
Sean.
Yoon,
Yeah,
who
Michelle
did the
Yoon.
second day of shooting with
Yes.
Amazing. But both works are concerned with portraiture of a kind, and I think you get very different results from that. And Nathan, I'd like to bring you into the conversation, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you came to know Joy. I know you worked with Carol in your feature film Between the Temples last year, but if you could tell us a little bit more about how this collaboration came about and how you approached doing a portrait of a subject on film.
Well, what happened was I went over to the Ansonia where Carol and Joy live, and I went to interview Carol in her apartment, which is upstairs, but she no longer sleeps there. And so after the interview finished, we went downstairs because she wanted me to meet her mother, and Joy was going to play piano for me. And I entered into the apartment that you just saw, and I was just mesmerized by. I felt like I had entered into a New York I would love to believe exists, and it indeed does in that apartment. And Joy played music, and I believe Jeremy came over and sang that day. He gets a lesson that she corrects him a bunch during. And so after that, I remember I texted Chris Wells, who was a co-writer and co-producer on Between the Temples, and said, like, I told him about it, and he said, well, we have to capture this. And Emily Schubert, who also gets a lesson from the BB lesson in the movie, she started getting lessons from Joy because she got close to Carol on the set of Between the Temples. She did hair and makeup on Between the Temples, got close to Carol, and then through that met Joy and started. So it kind
It's
of
a lovely voice.
I know, incredible voice. And so it was like through, and then talking to her and finding out all these stories, we figured we needed to get this on film. And you can't capture someone like Joy on digital. It's like she truly is an analog lady. And so like we decided to shoot on film, and we ended up using the rollouts as the rhythm of the movie.
With great success, I must say.
That was all John McGarry, the editor. He found that, and I was like, holy shit, that's the movie.
And Mary Rose, I'd like to ask you, in the end credits, there's a dedication to your grandmother who provides the superstition that sort of guides the film. If you could tell us more about that and what elements of her you were hoping to connect with and portray in this film.
Yes, well, the film is really grounded in like premonition and like obviously superstition. So I had become interested in like some lucky superstitions of hers, and we had always known that, like, me and my family, my mom is here, she could maybe speak to this too, but like we always grew up knowing like if you dream that you eat meat, like that is bad luck. And I found that like really visual and like visceral, and it got me thinking about like why is meat bad in the dream world as opposed to in the waking world. Like she was a strong proponent of like eating meat in like the waking world, so to me that kind of like dissonance was interesting to explore. But yeah, and I think her voice has so much character, and in the sense of premonition, I recorded her dialogue like she was visiting New York, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll wait till I go back to California where she lived. But I felt strongly like, okay, I need to actually do it right now. And then about a week later, she like was diagnosed with advanced stage lung cancer, and like her ability to speak was completely ravaged. So I feel like in premonition, it's also this like archive of the voice and this like oral history that I think is really cool and beautiful to have.
Absolutely. And can you talk about the way you've textured your film? It's so richly detailed. I believe it's shot on film. You have all of those bespoke credits just floating around. If you could tell us a little bit about how those elements came together.
Yeah, well, I didn't really go to technical film school, and so I don't understand a lot of like advanced digital technology. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start from the basics. Like home movie format, Super 8, also like the frame rate of Super 8, I think, is kind of, in a time sense, like distorts your perception of it being 18 frames a second. So it's like jumpier and more paranoid, which is like what I was trying to cultivate with the character, like waking up and feeling nervous about like having this meat dream. So yeah, I feel like the quickness and jumpiness, and also like the textural like residue of like, I don't know, this dreams kind of like start to degrade as soon as you wake up. So it's like this kind of textural haunting that maybe like lives in your brain as you go about your day and you see streets being torn up and meat everywhere.
Eve, I wanted to bring you into the conversation. As I mentioned yesterday, congratulations on taking your thesis film to Cannes and Telluride and South by Southwest, etc. I really love the story at the heart of your work, and I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about how you developed this story as a true artist in New York, how much of this was informed by your experience going to Q&As on Metrograph and things like that, and then how much of it came from just the confines of what you were required to do for your degree. And can you also talk about how Spike Lee came to be the EP? I know he's faculty where you went to school, but I don't know if he does that for everyone.
Yes, this film was definitely born out of a lot of terrible Q&As I've sat through, and also really inspiring ones that I've sat through. I made this film in a desperate moment in my life. I was breathing with weakness. I was anxious and nervous and totally wanted to kill myself. It was an awful time in my life, and I felt like this film was the thing that I needed, the desperate momentum I needed to write myself and project myself into the future. So it was this is really good, I use it every time. It was a breakup, a breakdown, and then a breakthrough. So it was great for me. And then for Spike, he literally just teaches at NYU, and he has a great grant that you can apply, and he's great. And when you meet him, he says, listen, I know you're a filmmaker and I'm a filmmaker, and I know what you want, which is money, so I'm just gonna give you money, you can go make your money and make your films. So,
Straight to the point.
yeah, straight to the point.
Could you tell us a little bit more about Jay and Kiki and how you fleshed out their characters and their relationship that really carries the whole film?
I think it's just drinking a lot with my female friends. And I don't know, I turned 30 this year, and I felt like when I was looking back on my 20s, the entirety of it was being torn between two things that I so desperately wanted, which was love and power. And I was always oscillating between both, because, you know, you'd fall in love and it's wonderful, but what about power? But power continued to elude me, because power for me meant becoming an important, successful filmmaker, but not enough time had passed, obviously, for me to become an important and successful filmmaker. So instead, all I could do was break up with my boyfriend. And it just felt like the only momentum that was possible. And I felt that so many of my friends shared the same grit and desire for power. And it felt natural to make this.
Most definitely. David, welcome back to the Walter Reed. David used to work here a long time ago, but now here he is on stage.
What did I do?
I also, the stars of Turtle Sandwich are here as well. If we could
Yeah.
give them a round of
Stand up, stand up.
Stand up.
There they are.
And for those of you who may not know, David and Dan Welch, who's here in the audience, and also Mr. Goon, they're responsible for the Cashiers du Cinema that you see around every once in a while. And they made an accompanying zine for this film. It's out in the lobby. Get a copy while you can. But David, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how this short came to be. I understand you were working in an after-school program at the...
Yeah, I mean, it's all about using the environment around you to your advantage. So I was teaching art in Brooklyn for an after-school program, and these guys were just such characters in my life every day for 3 hours. And I ended up feeling like I was in the 5th grade with them because we would just draw comics and write insults to each other, and all these other kids would ham along with us. And one day during the summer program, I was teaching kids how to make movies on iPhone. Like, we made one called Diarrhea of a Wimpy Kid, about this kid that craps his pants and everybody points and laughs at him. And then when I came back in the fall and I showed these kids this movie, they were like, how come we didn't get to make one? And I was like, okay, well, let's do it. And they're like, well, can we do it outside of school? And I was like, yeah, but I'm serious about this. I'm not just this goofy guy that, I make movies. And so for, about a week or two, we kind of put our heads together and started writing dialogue and scenarios and this, that, and the other. And finally, when it was time to go out on the street and make the movie, it was complete chaos. You know what they say about working with kids, it's chaos, but it's great. So I was kind of like, okay, we're just gonna roll with the punches, and the editing process was a monster, but I'm glad it was, because it really turned into something beautiful.
Absolutely. And how much of the script was come up with on the spot versus scripted beforehand?
Funny enough, I would say like 90% of it was scripted, because all the insults were insults that these kids created together. There's one boy who couldn't make it here. Shout out Nicholas Chen, who should be writing for Mad Magazine right now. He wrote a lot of the insults. But we do something called the Giuseppe Andrews method, which, if you don't know who Giuseppe Andrews is, he's this great trailer park filmmaker that he would print the lines out, roll the camera, and repeat the lines really fast to the actors, and then the actor would repeat them really fast back to the camera, and they would edit like that. And that's what we did, It's great.
I would like to open it up to the audience for a couple of questions. If you raise your hand, a microphone will come to you. There's one in the very back on the bench.
Hey, this question's for Nathan. How long did it take you to find like the through line for your, the narrative of your documentary? What you wanted the heart to go through? At what point was that crystallized for you?
I mean, we wanted it to feel like an afternoon spent with Carol and Joy, and so when going over it with John, the editor, like, it was just a matter of kind of picking the key moments, because there were so many stories, but also we were limited by the amount of film we'd shot. So there were so many stories, but also with the limited allotment of film, it kind of dictated what would actually make it into the documentary, I guess. But yeah, I mean, John could speak more to it, but we had it kind of, we sent back and forth like notes documents as to like what it should look like, and it kind of resembles some of those early, this early idea of what it would be, because it made sense. It's semi-linear, but also we were able to go off on these little excursions, with musical excursions and such, because of the nature of being in that apartment and people coming in and out, and that's how it feels to be there, So it was just about replicating that, really.
I'm curious, did you always have this in mind as a sort of mid-length 40 to 50-minute piece,
No.
or was it ever a feature, ever shorter?
It was
going to
be
together?
under 12 minutes was the idea.
All right. What happened?
But then, something happens when you're working on it, and the initial edit, I think, was like 46 minutes, and then we just kept whittling it down. But you need to give her time to talk. I can't imagine it shorter. And there was a festival that had invited us if it were under 20 minutes, and we said no, like we wouldn't cut it down. So it just kind of dictated that we were going to stay in this, 38-minute kind of cut.
Are there any other questions from the audience? I saw a hand go up right over there in the middle of the back section. Microphone is coming.
Hi, I really enjoyed everyone's content today, and I have a question for Mary Rose McClain. I was really compelled by the footage that was shot at the butcher shops. Could you speak to your process and experience shooting that footage and developing any relationships with butchers that you featured in the film?
Yes. I tried a lot of butchers that didn't respond to me. It's a really masculine field, butchers, and this movie is really about, like, I don't know, kind of matrilineage, and I think they were a little iffy about the idea of, like, having meat as this bad omen. But I went around Carroll Gardens one day with a bunch of printed out sheets of, like, describing the project, saying it would just be me with Super 8 camera and I wouldn't record any sound. And some of them were like, oh, we'll call you back, but I never heard back from a lot of them. But eventually, I filmed at Staubitz Market, which is, they claim to be one of the oldest butcher shops in Brooklyn. And when I was there, I was shooting and I was like, perfect, I got everything I need. And then I realized I put the wrong cartridge in the camera that had like way less film on it. And I was like, oh my God. And I got too embarrassed to go back. And so, but luckily, because Carroll Gardens has so many butcher shops, like probably 5 to 7 within a mile radius. So I just walked around the corner with my setup and was like, can I film you chopping up some meat? And they were like, come back tomorrow morning, we're getting half a cow. And it was perfect.
Do we have one more question in the audience? Down here in the front with the red hair. In the middle.
All of your films were so beautiful. I kind of have 2 questions, but I'll make them super quick. Nathan, for you, did you always imagine shooting 2 cameras? Because there were a lot of like really beautiful moments of just like watching Carol observe her mother, and I was wondering if you like did a day with only 1 camera and then realized you needed both at once.
It was the opposite, actually. The first day, so we shot 2.5 days. The first day we had 2 cameras, but we burned through too much film. And so when we returned the next day, we only had 1 camera. But I just want, it's so lovely to watch Carol talk to her mother, watch her mother, that like we wanted to capture that as much as we could. But we were, yeah, as much as we could afford, exactly.
And then, Dave, my question for you is, I just like loved the like Pokemon like UI on top of the movie, and I thought it made it feel like really fun and dynamic. And was that their idea or was it your idea? And how, like, also just in Premiere, like, how did you make it actually?
Oh, you're talking about the captions and all that stuff? I mean, I thought that it was important in making this movie that it would be the movie that I owed to like my 10-year-old self, So I was like, that's why we shot it on DV, because that's what my dad was using when I was a kid, and all the stickers and stuff that they have were my collection from being a boy. But there was something missing in the cut that I sent to them like in beginning of the year. And they were like, oh, we should add in all these big special effects and explosions and this, that, and the other. I was like, okay, you want to give me $6 million? Let's do it. But I was like, all right, let's compromise. Let's do this. Because there's a lot of compromising with these guys, Because they're at the end of the day, they're in charge. But so I was like, why don't I take all these like old school video game effects? Because they love Pokemon and kids still are into all that stuff. And they would get their Pokemon cards taken away, and I would have to give them back. And I was like, okay, so let's turn this into like an 8-bit odyssey, and kind of get us from the adult brain into the kid brain, and find that beautiful midsection. And so that was all just done in Premiere with like just a lot of copy and paste type effects that you could easily do in a copy machine, but then applied logically to digital interface. So yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for being here and sharing your films with us.
Thank you.
Coming out.
Thank you.